their destination.
Good afternoon, everyone, and we apologize for the slightly late start. And I'd like to welcome all of you here on a Friday afternoon who've joined us today for this half-day summit on smart and responsive government, harnessing big data and analytics. Quite simply, just in a couple of lines of introduction, I remember when I met Dr. Sen to talk to him about today's summit, I told him that like many people, I'm very scared of numbers. And I think there are two things today that, the confluence of two things that comes together whenever we're talking about big data and analytics. One is our fear of numbers, and the second is sometimes our fear of technology. So quite simply, just to introduce the subject today, I'd like to say all we are talking about is how the government of India and we as individuals generate and utilize so much data in our daily lives. Every day the government is not just collating and assimilating, but also on its behalf generating so much data, one. And second is we're just here to discuss, debate, and talk about how we can harness the power of that data. It's a gold mine that we have with us. How can we harness that power to make government more smart and more responsive? Without further ado, I'd like to now introduce our very distinguished panel for this first inaugural session. I'd like to first introduce Mr. Sudipto Sen, who is the Regional Director, Southeast Asia, CEO and Managing Director, SAS Institute India. Mr. Sen is been with SAS for over a decade now, where he has established SAS as a market leader in business analytics and enterprise intelligence market in the country, and has ably led SAS to double-digit growth. He is a graduate in science and holds a master's degree in business administration, and has had an illustrious career spanning almost 25 years in the IT industry. I'd like to now welcome him to join us on stage, please. I'd like to now welcome Dr. Pramath Sinha, who is the founder and managing director of 9.9 Media, which, as some of you know, is the parent company of iGovernment. Dr. Sinha is a media entrepreneur, also education is a field that he cares deeply about. He is the founding dean of ISB Hyderabad, as well as a fellowship now that he has instituted for young Indians in India, doing some really interesting things. And he's also senior director with the Albright Stonebridge Group. Thank you so much for joining us. Last but definitely not the least, I'll request now Mr. Sen and Dr. Sinha to welcome Dr. Pranab Sen, who is the chairman, National Statistical Commission, Government of India. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Sen, I'm sure does not need an introduction from me to most of the people in this room, but I'd still make an exception and do that here. He is, as I said, the chairman of the National Statistical Commission, and has had a long and distinguished career both in academia and the Government of India, as the Secretary to Government of India, as well as an advisor to the Planning Commission. And he was also appointed as the first Chief Statistician of India, which is actually the functional and technical head of the National Statistical System in the country. And he served as Secretary, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation from 2007 to 2010, and moved back to the Planning Commission in 2010 as Principal Advisor, Power and Energy, until recently served as Advisor in the Perspective Planning Division in the Planning Commission before being appointed to his current post. I thank you so much for joining us here today, Dr. Sen. Thanks. I now hand over to Mr. Sudipto Sen to make his welcome address.
Honorable Dr. Pranab Sen, Dr. Sinha, distinguished guests, speakers, members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed my proud privilege today to accord you a very, very warm welcome to this event. To us, this event is very significant, primarily because we believe SAS as an organization, globally we have played a very important role by contributing to many countries, and specifically in India, we are very, very excited and enthusiastic about joining hands with this elite group in doing things which would have impact to the citizen of this country at large, also contributing towards many areas, be it the economy by ensuring that tax collections could be improved upon, be it the health of the citizens, providing services and insights on how probably the healthcare services could be directed to ensure that there are no endemics or pandemics which are happening, to ensure the security and safety of the citizens by ensuring that the terrorist activities could be well prevented using analytics. We are indeed very proud to be working with many such organizations, and I can see participation from many of the organizations, including from Maharashtra. We have Mr. Agarwal as well as Ma'am sitting out here. Let me kind of give you one or two examples of how analytics have played a role in our own country in contributing towards growth of either collection of revenue or preventing fraud. One example which comes to my mind is the Maharashtra Sales Tax Department. When we engaged, it was a scenario where the complete process was automated and digital data was being collected and which was available. They used SAS very impactfully to find issues where fraud was happening, and guess how it happened? We found that there's a scenario of what is called turnover tax. So some of the organizations who were doing the fraud, what they did, they created, for instance, ABC Company Limited, ABC Company and Brothers, ABC Company and Sons, and blah blah blah, with the same address, and they ensured that the total transaction value was always below the threshold, so that they were not paying that turnover tax and we caught them. That was not the only one. We found scenarios of the kind where fictitious invoices were generated, A selling to B, B selling to C, C selling to D, and each one of them in the chain was claiming refund, but in the chain nobody was paying really the tax to the government. So when such things happened, it was indeed a beginning of a journey where they started using analytics in a big way to even find trends such as if there was a cement dealer who was paying 10% more as compared to last year, was it in line with the macroeconomic factors? Was it in line with the growth which was there, for instance, in the steel industry or in the infrastructure industry and so on? Because there was a huge correlation between them, and any such variation could lead to finding, fraud and taxes not being paid. The other example which we saw in an organization called Arogya Shri. This is an initiative in government of Andhra Pradesh, where government is providing healthcare facility to folks who are below the poverty line. They issued a ID card to these individuals, and with that card, individuals could walk into any hospital which was defined by the government, not necessarily only the government hospitals, including private hospitals across the state. All they had to do was to go flash their card, and they could even get high-end healthcare facilities such as open heart surgery to doing angioplasty. So government wanted to make sure, especially Arogya Shri organization, that misuse should not happen. And using SAS, they found scenarios where some particular hospitals were hand in glove with some of the doctors, and the trend was that in some hospitals suddenly one found that number of angioplasty cases were substantially more than anywhere else. And that's when they did the detailed analysis as well as investigations, clearly the fraud came out. So point I'm making here is the moment there is a scenario of people being watched, automatically people become cautious. They stop doing or indulging in such activities which happens. There are also very positive things which are going on. For instance, Ministry of Health is making awesome amount of usage with SAS, as much as various Department of Statistics across the country are also using it very impactfully. Today, you are going to hear from the various, I would say, practitioners of businesses who are using analytics in a very impactful way. We have also invited a couple of our colleagues from our global operations as well to share some success stories, including some of them where the magnitude of how organizations really got benefit. One such example is in UK, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs Department saved £1 billion on a yearly basis using SAS to prevent fraud and bringing people into the taxation mechanism. So on that note, have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much once again for coming over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sen, also importantly for highlighting some of the threads that we are going to be, covering later in the day, and also for starting to unspool some of the issues that we'll be talking about later. I'd like to now invite Dr. Pranav Sen, our chief guest for the day, to give his keynote address.
Thank you, Preeti. First, let me begin by apologizing for this delay that I've caused you, but then every traffic, unfortunately, is not in my control. I'm very grateful to the organizers for having invited me to present the keynote address. And I feel a little inadequate for the purpose, despite having spent a fair number of years in both being a major user of data in the government and then a major generator of data for the government. The inadequacy actually comes from the fact that governments are typically about the most complex organizations you can think of in the world. Even the largest global MNCs do not compare in complexity to the smallest of companies. And so when one is talking about data, one has to be very careful. What are we talking about? So what I'll try to do is put some of my experience in government into a framework, into a perspective where perhaps some of you will be able to place your activities. Although from what I noticed, a fairly large chunk of you are on the data provision and data management side. And I don't know how many of you are really from the policy side, which is really the user side. If one looks at government activities and the use of data in government activities, there are four broad categories of activities that any government officer engages in and will do so at some point in his or her career. The first is identification of issues and problems. The second is, having identified an issue or a problem, to design an intervention. So that's the second. Having designed an intervention, to monitor the implementation of that intervention. And finally, after having intervened and monitored, make sure it's worked well, to do an evaluation. So it's IIME. Each of these are actually hugely data-intensive processes if you care to think about it. The problem is, number one, the types of data you need for the four types of activity are very different. And it is futile to think that you can have a single data set that's going to do it all for you. It will not. The main thing that we need to keep in mind is that at the end of the day, the government is also structured in terms of its sort of institutional structure, with different responsibilities being given to different officers within the system. So it is conceptually possible for us to break down the data needs depending upon the functions that a particular individual or a particular office is playing. But having done so, you then run the risk, and this, by the way, is endemic in government, is getting into silos where within a particular ministry or a department, you have 4 joint secretaries doing 4 different functions and never talking with each other. Indeed, this is one of the commonest problems of government. So when one is really talking about data systems, one needs to keep in mind that these 4, which are really analytical constructs that one is making, are really integrated in an important sense. And that there are always feedback and feed-forward loops from each of these 4 things. Let me begin then with the issue of identification of issues. Typically, a government department will have a well-defined area of its operation. Some of the departments, of course, are more overarching, like the finance, or perhaps planning, but most of them have fairly well-defined areas of operation and the sorts of issues and problems that it is supposed to deal with. And these are laid down in fairly great detail into the allocation of business rules. Right? So presumably, from the allocation of business rules, one should be able to figure out what is the kind of information that you need to be able to see how your sector, as it were, is performing. Is there a problem that needs to be addressed? The problem, of course, is that more often than not, you will not have the machinery to collect that data. And that data will have to be collected by somebody else. Quite typically, this function is carried out by the Ministry of Statistics at the center and the Department of Economic and Directorates of Economic and Statistics of the states. But again, if you take the trouble to talk with the people who are in these functions, what you will find is that even in this role, their mandates are restricted. So what you do get is that even as a descriptive delineation of the system that we are dealing with, there is an inadequacy of data simply because, or not just of data, of information at large, simply because there hasn't been enough thought given to how this information should be collected and placed before the larger group. This is just the identification is very, very data intensive, but it's a relatively easy kind of data. Most of the data that you need, most of the statistics that you will use when you are doing identification issues is descriptive statistics of various kinds. Most of us tend to stick to things like averages, means, things of that kind. Some of us actually do look at things like dispersion, but by and large, this is descriptive. And you can look at single data sets and say, yes, the problem is cropping up. The real issue comes at the second stage, which is when you've identified a problem or an issue that needs to be addressed, and you have to design an intervention. Interventions come in 2 types. One type is policy. Policies are about changing the rules of the game so that people's behavior, not just people, agents' behavior, change in a particular way to subserve the objective that you're seeking to attain. So policies are about behavioral change. The second are basically programs, most commonly known as schemes, but programs are actually wider, which are direct interventions by government in the delivery system. Now, both are interventions, but the two operate very differently. Policies are about changing behavior. The programs are usually about taking behavior to be given as we understand it and designing an intervention which rides on those behavioral attributes. This is the most analytic intensive part of any government activity. And this, unfortunately, is the part where, at least in my 22 years of experience, we are the weakest. If you think about policy making, right, what you will find is that in most cases, there is a jump from a description to a solution. The analytical part seems to be a little, well, what should I say, at the gut feeling level. I think the only organization which actually clearly comes out and puts the analytics down in black and white is the Reserve Bank of India. I cannot think of any other wing of the government which bothers to do so. And the suspicion is that they do not bother to do so is because they don't bother to do so at all. So this is, and by the way, policies are tough, because to do policy right, you must understand, number one, you must understand behavior. Much more importantly, much more difficultly, you must understand what will change that behavior. Now, here, as I said, RBI comes out right up in front and says, I'm increasing interest rate because I believe all of you guys are rational people, and when I increase interest rate, you will reduce your investment and you will increase your savings. That's the analytical part. Find me anybody else who says that. So this is difficult. Anybody who has actually worked on trying to infer behavior and behavioral change from data will tell you it's extremely hard work, it's extremely sophisticated work. The second part, which is the design of programs, particularly design of schemes, is equally difficult, but of a different kind. Because any intervention, and think about it, any intervention is going to change behavior. So unless you understand how that change is going to happen, you may actually design your programs wrong. In fact, the common complaint against our government is very largely the delivery systems don't work, the entire public says, the government delivery systems don't work. But an equally common charge is that the programs are badly designed. Designing a program is not, guys sitting down and saying, okay, we have to have, let's say, a polio program, and so let's send out, 2 million guys with vials of polio and give it to every child around. That's not design of a program. The design of a program is understanding what will bring the kids to get the polio. We know, for instance, in UP we had a problem where a very large section of the Muslim community said that the polio program was designed actually against them. This is an understanding one has to have, and you do have it. But this is perhaps something that will not come out of data, but it comes out of information. But there's a lot of other things which does, in fact, come out of the data. But the data needs for both policy and the design of programs is very different from the pure descriptive. The pure descriptive is only one component. You then need to have a whole bunch of other variables which allow you to do the analytics that are necessary to be able to carry out both this function of designing interventions. Having done that, we go to monitoring. Now, this is something I think most people in government understand very well. And I must say that over the time that I've been in government, the kind of improvement we've seen in the MIS systems of ministries has been phenomenal. When I first joined, they were pathetic. Now, actually, they're pretty good. So this is something we understand well. So I won't elaborate on this one. Then we come to the last one, which is evaluation. This is tricky. Evaluation is, in economics, one of the more complex functions that we perform. And evaluation is something which is very, very difficult to do unless you actually embedded it in your whole design process, which means you start at the point where you identify the problem and you are thinking about any intervention. The evaluation process must be built in from that stage itself. And evaluation systems need to feed back into the monitoring system and back into the design system. This is the part where we all fall down very badly. So if you really look at it, of the 4 components I talked about, there are 2 components which we do a reasonable job of, not great, but reasonable job of, which is the identification and the monitoring. The 2 that we actually do a very poor job of are the 2 which are analytically the most demanding, which is the designing interventions and the evaluation. Now, why is this difference? The difference really comes that whereas the identification and monitoring, in an important sense, requires data which is within the control of the ministry or department, the other 2 require you to go well beyond it. So when we talk about big data, we are not talking about high frequency data, or we are not talking about the census where you have 1.2 billion people and their particulars, so records going to God knows what magnitude. That's not big data. Big data is about a wide array of data which speaks with each other to be able to inform our decisions. So, you hear a lot of talk, and I'm sure it's going to come later as we go along, about things like data mining. Data mining is wonderful when you have high frequency data coming in, and it's particularly useful when you're trying to detect things like fraud. It's a classic data mining kind of problem. All of it is ultimately based on what's called pattern recognition. But then somebody has to be able to specify what those patterns are. Because after all, the computer will generate patterns for you, but what pattern makes sense is a human activity. And that comes from very specific domain knowledge. But you will not be able to even specify it until you understand what the data is doing. So we are really talking about not just the presence of data or the ability to handle data, but what we are really talking about is to understand what data can do for us. And I hope that this half day will give us more insights into it, and I would very strongly urge all of you to ask questions. Ask questions, because what you will probably be getting exposed to are really the tools. But at the heart of it and behind all of that are the heuristics that you use in your day-to-day work. That converting those heuristics into something which can be given shape through numbers is really what we should be talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sen. In fact, 2 of the things that you said, one was about understanding the needs as far as before designing anything or before even going into implementation mode. I think understanding the needs and requirements of what is it that we're trying to do is, I think, a very key point that you made in your speech, as well as the other fact that is mentioned very often whenever we organize a discussion like this, which is about data sets talking to each other. And I think that also reflects the broader goal that we have here today. One is understanding two sides, understanding one, the technology that's available, but more importantly, also understanding what can that technology do to address the problems that different departments face, some of the issues that they have, and also allowing people to speak to each other. I'd now like to request Dr. Pramod Raj Sinha to give the vote of thanks, please.
Thank you, Preeti. I think in the interest of time, even though she's not telling me not to say anything about data, I will not say anything and do the formality of thanking our guests. Dr. Pranab Sen has been sort of vicariously associated with us because he's a good friend of my partner Anuradha Mathur. We are founders of 9.9 and she always keeps talking about it, about you, sir. So it's great that we were able to get you here for today's event. Thank you very much for coming. In the messiness of all the confusion that comes from big data and data and mining data, I think your remarks were very clear and precise, and I enjoyed listening to you. So thank you for coming, and I hope the others also took something away. You were very frank about how today we operate in our country, but it's also remarkable how much progress there is with being able to do stuff with data in our country, and it's quite remarkable. I have the ease of not remembering names because we have another Mr. Sen. So thank you, Mr. Sen, also for being here today. It's great to be working with SAS again. SAS and 9.9 and iGovernment have been old partners. I see some of the people here we've worked with. It's always great to be partnering with you and your team. And most of all, thank you all very much for coming on a Friday afternoon. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. It's always tough to get away at the end of the week, and especially a week that already had a holiday. So we do appreciate that you made the time to come. And I do know from the preparations that have gone into the rest of this afternoon that you will have a meaningful session. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinha. I'd like to now, on behalf of SAS and iGovernment, thanking Dr. Sen again, would like to just present him with a small token of our appreciation in his presence here today. Thank you so much, Mr. Sudipto Sen. Thanks, Pramod. Thank you. Once again, a very distinguished panel, and as Pramod mentioned, already things have been simplified for us when we start to go